Hi guys, I'm Dana Alhanbali and this is something to consider. What happens when the goal you've spent your whole life chasing is finally behind you? Most people talk about the hustle, the scale, the glory of building something from nothing. But what's often left out is the emotional cost, the trade-offs, the quiet moments after the exit. When the business is sold, the title's gone and your name is no longer on the door. My guest today, Bilal Ballout, one of, I think, my favorite people that I've met this year, entrepreneur, operator, and co-founder of BMB Group, the company behind some of the region's most beloved brands. He bootstrapped the business with just 500,000 dirhams, scaled it into a global powerhouse, and exited in 2021 through a full cash acquisition. MashaAllah. But Bilal's story isn't about transaction. It's about transformation, about what it means to build with intention, lead with integrity, and make hard choices when no one's watching. It's about staying rooted in your values when the world is watching your performance, not your process. In this episode, we talk about self-worth, responsibility, and the question every founder eventually faces: who am I beyond what I have built? I hope you'll find something to consider. Bilal, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. What a great introduction.
It's a testament to what you've built.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Bilal, in 2021, you exited BMB after years of building something from scratch. Again, I feel like I have to underline this because it's such an incredibly difficult feat to accomplish. You led it into a full-scaled global business and you watched it grow into one of the regional giants. And then once you were ready, you walked away. What did that moment feel like? Was it pride, relief, grief?
You know, it was a mix of, so to give you some context, we were three partners, me, my brother, and my cousin. My brother exited in 2016, a few years before us, and we stayed on board. And I remember when my brother exited, me and my cousin had this sense of both fear that our third musketeer has left us, but at the same time, excitement that we have to keep building and keep growing. And so when the time came to exit, to be very sincere, it was a mix of the relief part was only on one thing, which is financial independence. Because from the beginning of the journey, there was no cash out. There was no all our chips were in, and so when the business was running on debt from banks, even though we were cash flow positive. But as an entrepreneur, you always learn. I feel like there's two types. There's the ones that throughout the years keep cashing out, and you talk to them, and when they're middle-aged, they tell you, "Yeah, I've bought so many apartments and assets." But in our case, we were running on mortgages and loans, and in our personal lives. So that was a extreme moment of relief. The part that was, I'd say, difficult was, looking at the team that were with us because they believed in the dream and when you spend 17 years, it becomes your baby. It's beyond just your business. Letting it go was so difficult. The good part is we signed an agreement that we would stay on board as management for a few years. So it was a slow detachment. It wasn't on the spot. So that was a bit of a relief.
So the transition helped to an extent.
The transition definitely helped. It helped, but I have lessons learned from that as well.
Oh, can you share a few?
Yes. I believe there's a very healthy time frame to a transition. I've met a lot of entrepreneurs recently who've sold their business. In fact, one yesterday who sold 50% of his business, and he's in it for the long term, and he's going to stay with them for another few, 5-6 years. I think in our case, we stayed 2 years. I think the truth is that when you are acquired, I would give it a maximum of 12 months and you need to leave. Because what happens, not intentionally, is you start having this feeling that, well, am I the boss? Are they? It's not healthy. You know, so it's good to have a short time frame. It allows you to move on, but then you got to move on. And yeah, that I'd say that was a big lesson for us post acquisition.
That's such a relatable thing, and thank you for saying that, because I think there's a misconception around how easy it is when there are people that are more involved in your business. For me, I remember when I exited mine, it was a good 5 months, and they were the hardest 5 months of my life. Not because we were, angry at each other or fighting or anything dramatic like that. It was so difficult to let go of who I was to that company and how I was going to see someone else for all the right reasons come in and take over. It was not easy for me.
Yeah, I think it matters a lot, depending on your character, right? So if you're someone who, in my case, someone who is very keen on making the final decision, who believes that based on your experience, you're able to move fast and pretty much get it right most of the time. It's very difficult when then there's a whole layer above you of bureaucracy, etc., which is very normal. I think it's healthy for a large company to start adding these layers in, not too much, but I say it's very difficult for an entrepreneur to become a corporate person, because the personality you've built is not fit for that.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, again, it depends on your character. Some can absorb it for a longer period of time, but I've not seen many successful cases where someone's lasted a long time in that kind of position. And so from our side, I think a year in, it was kind of like when when you're in a relationship and you've agreed with each other that you're about to move on, but you're still living in the same house, and after a year you're looking like, well, it's time,
Yeah.
and that was, for us, it was time.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I completely understand. You referenced when you were talking about one of the hardest things to let go of was the team that was there from day one and believed in the dream. Again, this was something you started from scratch. What was the dream? Because you didn't spend a lot of time in corporate before starting this, so you had zero experience to bank on.
So first of all, a little bit about our company. We were private labeling for some of the most exciting confectionery brands in this region, and we built some of our own brands too. And if you take a look at our team, even today, because they're still there, they're young, energetic, innovative, and what used to excite us every single day, I mean, we manufactured more than 2,000 SKUs across everything from chocolate to Mediterranean sweets. Wow. To healthy snacks. So and across 30 different countries. So our day-to-day, whether it was innovation meetings, whether it was the challenges we faced being a food company in general, and I could go department by department, that level of excitement, that drive, got people. I mean, we definitely were not the highest paying company out there, but got people to come because they knew that day they were about to learn so much. Like literally every single day, I felt we all went back home thinking, "Oh my God, today was a course at university," and so we're all learning on the job, but we were learning together. It's a very strange. I don't know how to describe it beyond the culture was one where we were okay to make mistakes, but we were very good at making decisions. And I don't know many that call it luck but that built it that way. And so, when you're about to leave that level of excitement, that it's hard. And the dream for everyone was where we, as a company, we grew year on year, over 20% since inception. And when you see that type of growth, because it's one thing to put the effort, but when you see the results, people were always like, the celebrations we had in the office was, we just landed Walmart, or we just landed, a small client in Jumeirah, and we'd all get excited, and then everyone would make plans on how to visit this client on the weekend, and so small wins, big wins were always celebrated. That was the dream, to become the largest confectionery business in the region, if not the largest food business one day. Different dreams for different people in the organization, whether it's the finance team or the supply chain team, or if you meet our factory manager and his team, they tell you we were running one of the most complex operations across 3 different factories. And what excited them every day was the day ended on a good note. So yes, I still meet with the team. I check on them as friends, and I can tell you that they always say, in reality, they never looked at at how much they got paid, and they always believed in the vision we had for the company. That was the dream that we all signed up for.
Beautifully put. It's worth noting, you mentioned Walmart, but you guys became the baklava brand across the United States, which is no small feat.
Yeah, credit goes to my partner, my partner and the team in the US who built those relationships, and the way they did it. We ended up opening an office in Bentonville, in Arkansas, where Walmart is based. And became very close to the whole team there, understood what they needed, rather than, we didn't do it as an export model. In any country we operate in, we end up building a team on the ground, and we understand the culture around, because by the way, baklava over there is very different than the baklava we eat here.
I would imagine so.
Yeah. The honey versus sugar syrup, much larger pieces, walnut versus pistachio, like small details like that.
But what I love about what you did when you talk about the story and when you reference it, the effort of going and opening near Walmart, setting yourself up there with the ambition, you almost manifested that opportunity for yourself.
Look, other than, how do I put this? Why did we put this type of effort in everything we did? Passion. We're so passionate about it. We're not there. We're not traders. We're not trying to just sell baklava. We're trying to make sure that, the baklava you find in the US is the Americanized version of baklava, and not just the ethnic. By the way, we have 2 different types of baklava in the US. We have there are states where a lot of Arabs live, and there are states where it's predominantly white Americans, and they have 2 different baklavas. That level of research, let me take a step back. Let me tell you something I've learned across this journey. What helped us succeed? There are a lot of people who have more money than us, or started off with more capital. But knowledge is something I think you could always win on, because knowledge is all the research and all the effort you put in. When we went on this adventure, I think we became the most knowledgeable company in producing, at least in this region, in producing the confectionery we did. And so the way we engineered our products, I think that's what I would call, and people call it innovation, it's that hunger to learn what we're doing versus just the selling part. And that to us created sustainability in the business, because when we created clients, they weren't clients, they were partners. They knew that we had something very different to everyone else. They knew even our conversation, the way we talk, the efforts we put in. The gentleman who moved to Arkansas is Lebanese, living in Dubai. And I remember when he first moved there, he was excited. And then he called us and said, by the way, this is like, I'm still in the middle. It's developing, but I'm in the middle of nowhere at the moment. And now he loves it. Now he's set up there. He's permanently based there, and he made it home.
Wow.
But you don't do that just for the pay.
You don't do that just for the pay. That's very, very clear. So let's go back, take a step back to the context of your life, your upbringing. Why are you like this? Why did you choose a route like this to dedicate 17 years of your life to building this business?
When I was a kid, I've always been passion driven. So I remember even when I used to be at school, I don't know I don't know if this is a nurture or if it's a nature thing, but I remember even in class, I was always in my head creative and I would want to express that in class, but maybe I was too shy to do so. I always got excited about storytelling. So if the teacher was exciting in the way they described the topic, I was all ears. And it carried on. And my dad was a great influence when it came to, because he was a serial entrepreneur. Many small businesses, but I think he influenced me and my siblings a lot because he was also a great storyteller. He still is a great storyteller. And when, and as I moved on towards university, I didn't know what I wanted to study, did math, then finance, only because it's the only topic I was good at. And then end up in chocolate. But what drives me is beyond anything. It's the why. It's just purpose. Like when I learned about chocolate, I just loved it, and I didn't just learn about chocolate. I became a master chocolatier, you can say, and I really enjoy it. So even now in my new business, which we can talk about later, but I love going into depth about the topic, and that drives me much more than the size. Because sometimes I talk to investors and they go like, "Well, is this $1 billion business?" And it quickly, to me, those are alien words.
Yeah.
I think, and I think that's why I chose this route versus because I did get a job with one of the big four at the beginning, and I mentioned before I lasted one day because I saw what the trajectory of my life would look like, and I didn't care for safety as much back then.
Interesting. So you took a bet on yourself.
Yeah, I took a bet on myself. I had much less to lose. When you're young, I was 21. And I think I would always encourage people to start young. It's never too late, they say. But, when you're young, you don't have much responsibilities. The truth is, you can afford to go out there, make mistakes. I was living under my family's roof. Didn't need much those days. I think you start, the risk return discussion starts taking place as you start having more responsibilities in life. But when you're so young, there's no risk return. It's just risk, and then you hope for the best.
I heard this quote recently by also an entrepreneur. He was the host of the show The Prophet, Mark Lemonis. And what was interesting is what he talked about entrepreneurship as this idea of people become entrepreneurs because they didn't find a place that accepted them as they were in the world. They couldn't find their place in the world. So they created their own space, which is quite powerful as an idea. And I feel like you are someone who has consecutively bet on yourself. So what has betting on yourself taught you about not just building a business, but about life?
That's a very deep question. The best way I can answer that is say what helped me is I went through a difficult childhood. I think people who go through, I was bullied as a kid, and that really shaped my personality, and among other things. So I think people who go through a rough upbringing, they build a certain character of resilience, and then they learn that they have to bet on themselves, because if they don't, they have nothing else to stand on. At least for me. And I've met a lot of people who, because I went to a course recently, and in one of the top universities, and I did this 1 week executive course, and then I remember the professor saying, entrepreneurship is taught. You're not born with it. I'm not sure how much I agree with that. I think a lot of people say they're entrepreneurs, but what I think the ones that bet on themselves and take risks, and almost all of the time have had a hunger that stemmed from some need to prove it to themselves, to their society, to their and that need, I'm not sure if it's created. It's not artificially created. It just happens with life. So in my case, it's my childhood. It's that whole journey. It's up till the last day before I sold, everything I went through. it created a deep need to make sure I keep betting on myself. And I kept saying, what's the worst case? And when you are comfortable with the worst case scenario in life, you take greater risks.
And you can conquer anything, I feel.
Yeah, and you can conquer anything in your head. A lot of times, I have to say, luck played a great part in us. I know a lot of amazing entrepreneurs who haven't yet sold their business. So I don't want to sit here and say after we sold that, look, we've done it the right way, or there's one path. I know there's one thing that creates great entrepreneurs. It's having a difficult life. Okay. So the ones who have managed to deal with uncertainty all their life, I feel they make great entrepreneurs regardless of the outcome. We've had that, and we've been lucky. Yeah. That's how I would put it.
Alhamdulillah. I would sum that up as resilience, because I agree with you. And I really appreciate how candid you're being about this, because I don't think that entrepreneurship or even successful businesses are about the end game. I think so much happens in between, whether it's amazing revenue, whether it's scalability, whether it's growth. A lot of the time, people view this idea of entrepreneurship as this journey that's supposed to lead you somewhere. And once you get there, khalas, you're done. And that's actually not the case. I think entrepreneurship at its core is everything that happens in between. And if I were to sum it up in a word, it is resilience. I get it. You talked about your childhood and the fact that it was difficult. And you talked about the role your father played in terms of seeing him as an entrepreneur. What was the relationship with your mother like?
So my mom is a very advanced soul. My father gave us lessons on entrepreneurship indirectly, just by shadowing him throughout our childhood. But my mom made sure we turned out to be good human beings. The values in me and my siblings, and they'll all agree, are we're our mom's kids. And my mom is a very advanced healer. Okay, she's an energy healer. We grew up always, I say I had a life therapist throughout my life.
MashaAllah.
I think everyone does need a therapist, especially
100%.
entrepreneurs. But I was lucky enough to have my mom by my side guiding me. And even when she knew nothing about the business, just I could give her the most difficult challenge I'm going through at the moment, and she would give me great insight from a perspective of how to act versus how to solve the problem at work. So I would not be, it's very clear, I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for her. Yeah. Even today, even as an adult, you'll always need your mom's love and care.
I agree, especially because the road can be quite isolating and lonely, which actually brings to mind another question. You talked about how she did help, but what is it that you feel like you needed in your journey?
You said something, it's a very lonely path. And by the way, so my parents are separated. So it's a lonely path. And sometimes what you need in life, you need to know that there's this one person you can always count on. Everyone needs that one person. You can't do it on your own. You can't say, I'm betting on myself and I only need myself. In my case, it was my mom. And, I'm very close to my siblings. I'm close to my dad. But the one stable person who has unconditional love, who doesn't really care if you've made it in life or haven't, or monetary-wise, who's always proud of you, who, when you do your worst mistakes and, you don't look at yourself in the mirror because today you had to make some very difficult decisions, would look at you and say, hey, it's okay. In my case, that was my mom. So she shaped me a lot, the man in me today, the values. She made sure that, look, especially in entrepreneurship, you change along the way. The book, The Animal Farm.
Yes, of course.
Explains it really well. So how you start off somewhere and you say to yourself, well, one day when I'm in this position, I'm going to make sure I have to be a little bit corrupt along the way. But once I get there, I'm going to go back to my original self. But then you forget who you are. She made sure along the way I didn't forget who I am. And, I kept my principles no matter what. And in our industry, there are so many reasons not to. So I made sure that didn't change. And she made sure that didn't change.
Wow, you're very lucky. That's beautiful. It reminds me of my mom too. Thank God for mothers. When you think back to parts of your journey, you talk about this idea of what sounds like you were in a constant state of pursuit. Okay, yes, you were grounded by values, which is incredible, but pursuit seems to be a common thread. Were there parts of your journey where you felt like you were almost performing versus being present and living?
Yes. I think it's very difficult, first of all, to always feel you're present. In fact, coming to this talk today, I was like, how present should I be today? And how, because life happens and you have your on days, you have your off days. And there were times I just felt I was playing my part. I was acting. But my mom taught me this sentence. I remember when I was a kid, when I would go to school, and it's the fake it till you make it. There's some days I feel like all of us feel like we're faking it. We're faking that role we're playing, and we just hope that no one notices. But the truth is, there's no perfect. You can't be present and conscious all the time. So for the most part, I think I faked it, and then thank God for the times I actually was conscious. It all added up into a great journey. So yes, it's not. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, no, I was so passionate and present and, there all the time. The one thing that never changed was the hunger. That's the part, whether you're present, you're not present, there's a fire. And that fire never changed. In fact, even today, post-exit, it's been a few years, it's still there. And you ask, what is that? And that's what I tried telling that professor. I don't think you can instill a fire in a person. It's up to them if they want to ignite it or not. You can teach them finance and rules and the economics, but fire is something that is a choice. I don't know if it's again, if you're born with it or if it's a choice you only make.
Yeah. I agree. I think you using the word choice is important because I think that's the difference between entrepreneurs and people that work outside of the space where it's your own business. It's a conscious choice that you are walking into a period of unknown where you are going to be met with challenges, opportunities, insecurities, love, hate, jealousy, money, lack of money. It's a lot, but you make the choice to go in there knowing that you're going to be faced with all those things, which brings me to another question. Have you ever experienced, I don't like the term failure, but I can't think of another one, but have you ever experienced a form of failure and what did it teach you?
I've experienced a lot of failures, and sometimes you experience it on a goal you've set for yourself. Sometimes on goals you've set with your partners at work, and I would say I'm responsible for this task or hiring this person, and it wouldn't go according to plan, and I would feel like, oh my God, whether it's proving it to another person, even later we had investors, or whether it's proving it to myself, then you start having doubt. What I was good at is killing the doubt fast. Okay, that was something I had to learn. Again, it's the fake it part, because the longer you linger in that doubt of why it happened, and so I'd be very scientific about it. So I'd say, okay, so why did I fail? What went wrong this time? Maybe if it was in hiring the person, maybe I didn't look for a certain character trait, or whether if it was a task, maybe I didn't do the right research. Whatever it was, I may try fix it for the second time. And if I failed again and a third time in that particular, I'd just stand back up. I definitely stand up faster when I fail than what normally it takes someone to recover from. I think that's something I picked up along the way. Again, I fake it in my head that, I stop listening to the voices in my head that say, oh my God, what everyone goes through, like, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I'm not competent in this, maybe. And by the way, even from recent history. Sometimes I sit with people that they would take a look at the outcome of your business versus their empire, and you get the voices in your head that I'm still small. No matter what you've built, you'll always be still small versus another person out there. And so you get the voice in your head that what I do is enough, or enough for who? So I would quickly again quieten those thoughts and just move on. But they come in. So you're human. They come in, and we all go through it. Again, it's practice. In fact, I think I failed so much in these 17 years that I've become really good at failing. And I think the guys who end up succeeding are the guys who go like, yeah, so what? I failed 10 times, but hey, on the 11th, we did really well. We don't have a problem with that.
What does success look like for you now?
Now, post-exit?
Yeah.
Success is on multiple fronts. I break it down to personal life and I break it down to career, because I do think they're different. But let's start with career. It's fire. It's evolution. The evolution of what you desire. It's natural to go from, in my past with BMB, we were so excited about building the region's #1 confectionery business, etc. I think now, in this stage of my life, I'm very excited about building something that leaves a great mark on this planet. In my new business, it's all about sustainability. And so that for me is my purpose right now. I've made it my purpose. And the fire is still there. The idea of waking up every single day to build something is what excites me and keeps me going. In my personal life, it's definitely to have more balance, because my life previously was not balanced. That's some of the privileges you get when you do manage to exit. It's the idea that, okay, I want to keep building, but at the same time, I want to give some time to, my health, my family, my friends, my travels. So that's something, to me, that would be a successful life. And, waking up every day excited about life.
It's interesting. I agree with you completely. It's not so much a change in life, so much as it's the privilege of getting to prioritize what matters most in your life. And you're building on your terms, which I feel is probably the biggest difference between then and now.
100%. Yeah. When you're building on your terms, and when you don't have in the back of your head the financial requirements, because someone once told me the biggest privilege you have when you get financial independence is you choose who you sit with and who you give your time to. And I completely agree with that. So yeah, this time it's on my terms.
What's one decision you made for the long term that was super painful or hard to do in the short term?
Oh, wow. If for the long term, that was super difficult in the short term. I would say, if I look back to when I first started, I would say saving, my budgeting skills. I remember in my early 20s, the only thing I would spend very nicely on is traveling. But I was always conscious to not live the high roller life and make sure, because my income back then was tiny, and I had to make sure that I could save enough for the future. And I think that came from my parents. That's what they taught us when we were young. It did mean that I would miss out on a lot of the parties and a lot of the nice dinners and so on. I don't regret that at all, because it gave me the type of freedom later on, a few years later, where I could have all that. But it was painful in the short term, because I had to apologize to a lot of people and say, sorry, I can't do that, without explaining why. I can't, go to a fine dining restaurant and spend that much, or take that very expensive boat trip and so on. So that in my personal life was a important one. And in my career, it's people. It's very tough in the beginning to fire people, right? You get better at it, but it's very tough. And I remember that in my first 3 years, of when we set up, I had to make some calls where people were, great human beings, but I could tell that we weren't going anywhere with them. And I was so young, and it was so painful to be the guy who had to put emotions on the side and decide just what's best for the business. In the long term, in hindsight, I'd look and I'm like, oh my God, thank God I did that, because a lot of, if you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, they tell you the biggest learning they have is it's the team that they've built it with, and some have gotten stuck with an old team and they don't let them go because they're either family or they're old staff that they really care for. And if I didn't build, or not just me and my partners, if we didn't build that from day one, where you perform, you have the same drive as us, or you don't stay with us, I think we wouldn't have gotten this far.
This brings up another idea or question in my head around closure. Do you feel like you are someone who has come to terms with the closure of specific aspects in your life, whether it's not just referring to your business? Do you feel like you have closure when it comes to specific relationships, to the person that you were?
Yes. And that's I think one of the most interesting questions I've ever been asked. Let me put it in a relationship format. So in my past, when I'd be in a relationship and things wouldn't work out and I'd break up, I seem to be able to move on faster than many people. And I wondered if that meant there was something wrong with me, or why am I not feeling this? Like, this person has been very special in my life. Why could I move on very quickly? But I've got this rational way of looking at things. Life is short, and if someone passes away that's dear to me, or if someone or a relationship ends, and even in aspects of myself, but I'm going to talk about others that then it relates to myself, then I reflect on it for a very short time, because I know internally, and this is due to my belief system, but I know that this is they will never leave overall in the larger picture of life and the universe. But in my current story, that's it. And so, of course I love them, of course I'm going to miss them, but I am ready to move on with life, because life is so short that I want to make the most out of it, versus spending years losing this precious gift of life, thinking about what just went wrong, or why did this end, or why, or things that are also sometimes outside my control. Aspects of myself have gone through the same. So Bilal 10 years ago is very different than Bilal 5 years ago. And even Bilal post-acquisition is different to Bilal pre-acquisition. I've had to, in fact, if you met Bilal pre-acquisition, my attention span, like the ability to sit here and have this conversation so comfortably, and I'd be sitting thinking about a million things. Like, I was always on alert. I've had to reprogram myself to be able to be much more present and relaxed, and for my health especially, post. I can't relate to that Bilal anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, that Bilal from the past, I can't. I look back and I'm like, whoa. And I have definitely compassion for that Bilal, and I understand why he had to do what he had to do, but I'm a different Bilal now. And I think that the ability to move on quickly has helped me.
So even your closure is a choice.
I think closure is I definitely believe that closure is a choice.
Bilal, you're very introspective and reflective when it comes to the way that you think about your business, your relationship to being an entrepreneur, and the relationships that you have within your family. I'm curious, you recently got married, and you are expecting a child any day now, actually. And I'm curious, what versions of yourself, or what lessons have you learned that you are taking into this new chapter, specifically around fatherhood and the relationship you have with your wife?
So that's okay. So there's multiple fronts to this. When I remember first the story of how I got married, I remember that I went through the different chapters of Bilal where Bilal wanted to meet someone and connect with them on a serendipity level. And I still believe. I mean, I definitely believe in love, but I believe Bilal that back then was not ready. When I was ready, it was. I remember sitting and thinking, okay, so what are the most important things one looks for in a long-term relationship? And I wrote them down. And I spoke to some close friends of mine. And before you know it, I met my wife. They introduced me. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was the person who always said, no, this traditional way of people introducing you doesn't work. It worked for me. And the decision to build a family stemmed from, so I've always loved kids. I'm very close to my brother's kids. And I went to my nephew's graduation. And I remember that day, a graduation, by the way, of like grade 2. Okay, so not so these days they do graduation every year, and I remember everything. I walked out thinking, oh my God, I love this kid so much that if I love my brother's son this much, how would I love my own? And you get to a stage in life as a man where you just feel like I am ready. That's the truth, okay? And I felt like I am ready. And when you're in that stage. I'm telling you this from a man's perspective who's, I'm 40 and I've been single and dating and trying to find my one for the last 20 years. The lens you put on is very different. And so I don't mean this to become a dating,
no, relax, please.
But it changes and then straight away you can recognize a great partner when you see one. So yeah, that, in 3 weeks' time, my son will be born. I'm very excited. And crazy enough, it hasn't changed yet. I mean, it's too early to tell, until he's born, but it's not changed anything in me. I think when you're ready, you feel like it's just a natural evolution of life. It's not like a big event I'm waiting to happen, or it just feels natural. I don't know how to explain it. So that's the stage I'm in right now.
Thank you for sharing that. I have an observation.
Yeah.
You're very trusting. You're very trusting to your instinct, to the process, to whatever comes next. And I'm wondering, how, why? I find it's a beautiful attribute. I don't mean it to sound like it's not, but it's different.
Because again, let's take it back 20 years. Okay, so throughout this whole journey, you have to make decisions, and then you have to trust that I've made this decision. So whether it's at work or with your partner, that I trust that this is the right person I want to build my family with. This is now what happens later, as with life, is some things work, some things don't work. But if you don't start it with that level of trust and conviction and fire, then if it starts with the doubt, then how do you even move? So I might come across as confident, and I'm telling you this, I'm human, and and everything has its ups and downs, and I won't sit here and tell you I've got it figured out. But what I can tell you is I'm making my decisions, day by day, with a long-term vision of how I'd like things in my life. So there's a long-term plan, but the decisions to achieve those long-term plans are on a day by day.
You gave nice insight to this idea of being conscious and making the choice to want to move into a space where you're sharing your life with someone, which I think is really nice. Out of curiosity, what, aside from what you've already said, the intentionality of what you want in a partner, what are some interesting learnings or takeaways that you can share around what it takes to build a relationship once you get there? Because you are getting married. Considered in our culture, it's late.
I believe what our parents used to tell us. When your parents tell you, and when your first love, okay, think of time at school when you first started dating and you were so excited, and your parents would laugh and be like, you'd think, why are they laughing? Don't they understand that this is the love of my life? And, and you think they're pessimistic. But then you learn, and I come from a separated family, but yet throughout my childhood, they did tell me the number one thing to look for is communication, right? So communication and respect. That trumps everything else. And I can tell you in my relationship right now, the way we talk to each other, because when you're of that consciousness, you will only agree to be with someone of that consciousness. The way we talk to each other comes from a space of always respect, whether you agree or you don't agree, and and the tone and the clarity of what you're trying to say and is so important. And I think if you take a look at how you build your friendships, that's what you use in friendships. You get along with people that you can be yourself with, communicate with, and then the next layer on top is physical attraction and so on. But we're built, and the society has built us differently. So we first go for physical attraction, then we go for, and then at the end we look for the communication part. And a lot of, I'm guilty of this. A few years into the past, I'd look and I'd say, oh my God, I didn't realize that we can't communicate on these things. I wish I started that way first. So that's what's helped me this time.
Super interesting. Based on everything that we've shared today, I'm curious, what would you want to ask me? What would you like me to consider?
No, I would like to ask you, because you have a very similar story. But I would like to ask you, what is your fire? Where do you bring your fire from? Because you've asked me, how do I make my decisions? How do I stand back up? But what about you?
Where does my fire come from?
Yes.
It's interesting, specifically because you and I also come from backgrounds where we are of one ethnicity, but we don't necessarily live in the country where we're ethnically from. And I think when that is the case, especially now in a very globalized world, that brings a different level of hustle and grit that I don't think can be replicated. It's not something that can be taught. It's something that you just have, okay? And I think what determines what you do with it comes from choice. Being very comfortable with this idea of I'm going to make a choice and I'm comfortable being held accountable for the choices that I make. I feel like I'm someone who, while I tried my best to follow the quote unquote right way of doing things when it came to my education, my grades, my initial corporate career, the way that my trajectory was going followed a very specific path. And when I started betting on myself, I started to reap, beautiful rewards. But it also brought to light a lot of things that I hadn't explored. A lot of things about myself and what I truly want, beyond what I was told I should want, started to resurface a lot. And I feel like when I think about what drives me today, it's not centered around anything external. And I know that sounds cliche. We talk about that a lot, but I want to delve into that more. When I say external, I'm not just talking about money or achievements. I'm also talking about the kind of validation or even being seen by someone else. And that's a very difficult thing to say, because as humans, it's a core part of how we exist. We want that. We live in community. And I'm very attached to that idea. But finding ways to see myself and accept myself has become a core part of how I make my decisions today. And that is very much driving me towards what fulfills me today. Because now what I seek is fulfillment. I completely relate to what you talk about when you say now you're in the business of sustainability and you don't even want to entertain, at least not at this stage, conversations around operational billionaire scale-up status. It's not top priority for you right now. And I get that. Because today, when I think about the choices that I make, the question that I consider in my head is this going to fulfill me? Is this going to bring me another level of reflection and introspection? Growth? Is it going to leave impact? Am I going to be able to help? Because that, for me, all of those things, that's what fulfillment means for me today. And that's where my fire comes from today.
But you see how easily you answer that with so much clarity, with so much. So I could say the same thing about you. You seem very confident about it, comfortable with your decision, and you seem like someone who's good at making decisions. So yeah, I think we have that type of fire in common.
We do. I'm telling you, ever since I met you, I think what I appreciate and respect so much about my conversations with you, although they've been few, but I feel like they've been impactful because you've chosen to be honest and vulnerable about where you are in life today and about your journey so far. And I feel like what has happened with me, especially over the course of the last 3 years, is it has made it abundantly clear who I would like to be surrounded with. And I feel like sometimes entrepreneurship entertains and invites inauthentic people who are there for the performance, which is why I really appreciate and I'm grateful for when I meet people that are ready to kind of shed all of that and just have a real conversation, because I think that's where growth lies.
I completely relate to that, and I think anyway, as you grow in life, you start emitting and attracting the energy that resonates a lot with you, and automatically those type of people don't fit in anymore in your life. True. And if anything, I can tell you now, as part of my recent chapter, my circle of friends has also shrunk, and the people I surround myself now with a lot are the people that I resonate with a lot. And if you took a look at just a few years ago, it was a much wider circle and so on. And it's not about them, right? It's about you and where you are.
100%. 100. And I'm glad you said it's not about them, because for me, it's not just the circle, it's the conversation that has changed.
Yes.
It's like the things that would have been top of mind just 2 years ago are no longer something that I don't even think about it anymore. I don't want to spend time talking about it.
But sometimes I have to say, even to me, a lot of times that's a lonely path, because sometimes you want to have the sort of conversations that are, not just deep, but that you feel are world changing, and you have this hunger to and you don't always find an outlet. And that's a good problem to have. Yeah. Right? It's a
good problem to have, but it also goes back to you asked me a question off camera around why I do this podcast. And I feel like, again, going back to this idea of someone else seeing me versus me seeing myself, when I feel like I'm not getting the stimulation I need from those conversations, my outlet becomes myself, whether it's through my writing, whether it's through my creativity of the scripts that we're developing in the company, whether it comes through the podcast, whether it comes through, and I find this to be such a privilege, whether it comes through a conversation with a stranger. Sometimes the relationship that I have with someone is only that 1 hour, but my goodness, what comes out of that conversation is just something I hold with me forever.
That's really nice. You know what? I should start up my own podcast.
Well, if you need any help, I'll let you know. You have an amazing story, and I'm so grateful to have met you. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me on. This has been a true pleasure.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Before we close, is there any specific way, if anyone wants to connect with you, learn more about your business, if you want to talk a little bit about your business before we go, what would be the best ways to connect with you?
I think the best way is through email.
Okay.
Yeah, just if they connect with me through email, we could write that, right?
Yeah, I'll make sure it's in the show notes.
And and I'll be very happy to connect with them there. And maybe we leave my new venture for the next
Done
part.
Deal. Khalas, inshallah. Thank you. To all our listeners, as always, thank you so much for the privilege of your time. Please do leave us a comment or a review if this conversation resonated with you in any way. And as always, I hope that you found something to consider.